Good morning. It's 10 o'clock in Berlin, and I give a very warm welcome to everybody who's joining the first webinar of the House of No Waste competition coming here from Berlin with speakers from various other places. My name is Benjamin Hosbach, and I have the honor to serve as competition advisor in this procedure. And after me, I will pass the microphone to Edeltraud Günther, who is the director of the UNU Institute Flores, and she will give an introduction to the project. Afterwards, the idea of today is that we are receiving 3 presentations of our honorary jury members. As you can see here on the agenda, Zegeye, Cherenet, Barbara Buser, and Mark Lee are going to give some insights on their view on the project, which will hopefully encourage some sort of discussion that we can have during these 2 hours. You're more than welcome to post questions in the chat. Our team will try to collect them and pass them over to me as the moderator, that we can use them as base of our discussions. After these 3 presentations and our discussions, at the very end, I will give some hints and some information for the procedure. Again, what are the key dates, of course, what are the requirements that are written in the competition brief, but however, I will try to give a summary on it. And finally, what with our experience is maybe a good advice for you to prepare a submission. So much as an introduction, and I hope it works technically, that Edeltraud Günther can give her welcome.
So welcome to this first informational webinar for our House of No Waste. And I hope now everyone can clearly also hear me. And we are really excited to launch this competition. I would like to just give you a few ideas about the vision, about the inspirations we had, and we are also here, of course, to answer questions. And when we developed this idea for the competition, we thought, of course, of competition, we thought of a real building. But more than that, it is really a call to rethink buildings in general, to make them less extractive, more regenerative. And we also have to see buildings as a resource for next generations and not waste. So therefore, we decided for the title of a House of No Waste. So just also rethinking how we build, that it all should be in a circle in the end. And therefore, we brought the concept of the resource nexus that connects material, what you have in buildings. You need energy, you build on space, land, water, soil. So all those different resources are interconnected, and at United Nations University, we also have our signatory moved for this. That means we have the different resources. They are also interconnected in different systems, and if you want to move one resource, you always also, with your hand, you also move the other resources. I like this symbol and this metaphor a lot. But not only resources, environmental resources are important, but they also must be integrated into a socially accepted and culturally adaptable system. Moreover, we are not alone with this vision, but our work is embedded in the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction of the UN Environment Programme. And we are a member of that, and we are not only a member of that, we also lead the priority action research in the Buildings Breakthrough Initiative of Global ABC. So that means whatever you also bring as potential contributors to the competition, to us, will then also be spread among the 360, meanwhile, members of Global ABC. So there you can also use this opportunity to showcase what you are doing, what your visions are. Why is this important? I think we are all aware that buildings are really a major source for emissions, for resource use. So, for example, in Germany, 60% of waste is construction waste. So this is really a significant amount. It's just the mere volume and weight that matters. And that also means that we have an immense potential for transformation. We spend it depends, of course, on our profession, but we spend 90% of our day in buildings. That also means that buildings can also change mindsets, because if we work and live in different types of buildings, that also supports us in transforming habits and transforming other sectors. And that also means that your ideas that you present should be replicable, they should be implementable. So think big, but also think small, so that it can be really implemented. Also include communities, what I already said. If you live in a building, if you talk to others, then the type of building that you are in might also inspire how you live and how even your culture evolves. What do we expect? Of course, it's a competition. We expect prizes, but we expect way more. We, as United Nations University, are part of the UN system. We are part of the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction. I mentioned that already. But our rector, for example, is on the scientific advisory board of the Secretary General. So that also means that we are really interconnected in the UN system, and that's a huge benefit also, that your ideas can then also be featured on UN platforms. That means they are shown internationally, they can influence change. We are directly connected also to member states, to ministers there, to decision makers. And the idea is therefore that you really then also develop ideas that can also be used for discussion. My camera, but myself, yeah, I'm sorry for that it didn't work. I'm sorry for that. It seems that you could not see me all the time. So then and now it says my mic has been disabled. I'm sorry. But I hope that you could hear me. We are here now to answer your questions, to also help you developing your ideas. It's more than a competition, it's an invitation to create a future with no waste. And therefore, we are looking forward to getting your creative ideas. And as I just got the message that my camera was not on, I was not aware of that, because for me it was visible. I still hope that you could listen to me, and now you can see me. Sorry for that, and happy to answer your questions. Thank you very much, and back to Benno.
Thank you, Edeltraud. And I think the first question to everybody will be, what is the whole competition about? Because as you, Edeltraud, mentioned, it's such a broad challenge, such a universal task, that of course the answers are as diverse as our beautiful planet is. And there is no ideal answer. Because as we as planners know, every place is different, every task and every use of a building has its own challenges. So don't think about the one solution for everything, because it doesn't exist. On the other hand, as Edel mentioned, think broad and think innovative and bold. to present your ideas, which is another characteristic of this procedure. We're looking for ideas, so no finished project which are somehow completed, but visions and strategies for whatever dimension in projects. We have received here the first two questions, which are focusing more on formal issues. I can maybe quickly answer them, but otherwise I would then pass the microphone to our first speaker. The first question is, how many people can be in a team? That's a very simple question, but of course important for you. There's no limit in teams. It's much more the other way around. Planning and construction is always a team issue, so you're more than welcome to team up with other disciplines, with colleagues and consultants to find the answer. So that would be the first question. And the second is, the person finished her master in 2020, but in June, can she join the competition? It is a period of 5 years and few months. The requirements for eligibility is your age, and eligible are both students and young professionals. So it doesn't matter whether you have completed your master or not. Of course, it will hopefully help you that you have completed it and you learned the experience. But on the other hand, exactly, students may have the freedom and thought that they find the right answer to our project. So I should actually click on, and then I would pass the microphone to our first speaker, which is Zegeye. And I have a few slides to share of one of his projects. We have discussed what we can present in the webinars. And the idea is that each of the jurors who will speak today and in the next webinar will show one example which has maybe an interesting approach. So could be maybe the answer to the House of No Waste in certain dimensions, and to inspire you in your thought. Zegeye, maybe you can introduce yourself also, and I will click through your presentation, if that's okay.
Yeah, a little bit of a correction. I'm not presenting my work or the work of another architect. I chose to discuss this issue, the concepts, through a traditional architecture. And, you know, as an African, I do believe very strongly that tradition is our prime resource to look towards the future. And we can really excavate wisdom and inspiration from some of a kind of timeless way of building things. So that's what I'm going to present. I'll be very brief. But somehow I was engaged in studying these projects, because years ago I was invited to design a community center in the rural setting of the southern highlands of Ethiopia. And there I had to study as a modest architect. I just wanted to study how people build their environment. And I had a chance to at least see the vicinities, particularly two ethnic groups, the Dorze people and the Sidama people. My project was actually located in the Dorze area, but you know, these are neighboring groups. So I had to study these two. So instead of presenting what I have done, which is not as good as what they have done, so I have to really present the way they think and the way they build, which I believe is very much in tune with what we are discussing and what we are trying to achieve in the House of No Waste Competition. In this study, I had to visit and then also make some interviews. And these are two. Can we go next slide, probably? Yes. These are the two typologies of houses, huts. of the Sidama people as well as the Dorje people. Because they are made from a very simple material, bamboo, and bamboo leaves, and or the leaves of the false banana, the plant that you see around these beautiful huts. As their envelope, that is what they are. One is to the left is the Sidama house, call it an onion-shaped house, an onion house. The other one to the right is a Dorje house, which they call it the elephant house, or the elephant nose house. And both are built with the same type of material, bamboo, highland bamboo of Ethiopia, as well as the bamboo leaves and the leaves of the banana, the false banana tree. And obviously, you can imagine that these materials are not transported. Can you go next to the next slide? So you can see here, these materials are not transported from far away. Actually, they collect them in a very ideal form. These days, of course, you have deforestation, then they might get a bit of a challenge. But while I was visiting years ago, the bamboo that they collect is just from their backyard. And the sheets of the false banana is also from their backyard. So it's quite challenging for me to see. The whole thing is super local. And of course, I had to ask about all the technicalities because I also wanted to build with bamboo. And the first question that came back then was, how do they fight against insects and termites? And they say, yeah, our kitchen is inside, and then we do the smoke, and the smoke takes care of the insects which attacks the bamboo. It's very simple. They add some incense in the smoke, and that's it. And also these huts do breeze, and then they're not really sealed, so one can see how the natural processes of making fire and the smoke purifies the whole material. The second one, obviously, is how do they deal with the decay of the bamboo, because on the foundation they simply kind of plant the whole basket onto the ground, particularly the Dorje house where my project was. So naturally the challenge is construction, and what do you do about the foundation if the bamboo itself is kind of planted on the ground? So the question of decay was my question. And the guy who was helping me to understand, the older guy, was very simple in his answer. He simply says, what do you mean? I mean, what happens when it gets old? I mean, this is a point that I wanted to underline. That's why I'm taking time. What happens when it gets decayed on the ground because of the soil, because of the moisture, whatever? And he says, yeah, we cut it 5-10 centimeters, and then we transport the house and then clean up, and then we plant the house again. And I said, oh, then it gets shortened, right? Yeah, every 5 years we cut and then we replant it. So it's getting shorter and shorter by the year. And then I said, and then what happens? Oh, yeah, it gets shorter and shorter. And obviously one day then we cannot use it anymore. And then I asked, and he says, yeah, it dies. It dies. You see, this is a challenge for me, the architect from town and from university, who are always kind of molded to think architecture as a notion, with a notion of permanence. That's the very first thing that we learn, right? And I asked him, you just allow it to die? And yes, as every other natural phenomena, we die, our house dies. And he asked me, what's wrong with days? And I asked him, well, I don't know, but at least that we build so that it lasts. and he asked me why. And I told him, because of our education, I said, because buildings also carry memories, and they are the embodiment of our collective historical realities. And memories are important. He said, yeah, memories are not for bamboos to carry. Memories are not for the stones to carry. Memories are for our hearts. And I asked him, who would remind our hearts to carry these memories? And he says, if we don't memorize through the process of our elders, then we are deemed to lose them. And the best thing that he told me back then was, to die well is equally valid with to live long. What makes is not how well you live, it is also how well you pass away. And I said, okay, that's something to learn from. That's why I wrote on the first page and the first slide, to live long is equal to die well. So in many cases, particularly after the inventions of modern materials, we try to surpass and challenge the notion of days. And then because we fail to do that, then we create a building which produces very strong and challenging materials to respect the natural orders. And that's exactly what I just wanted to articulate in this particular example. As you can see on the screen, then you see how the two house typologies are waved from bamboo and bamboo sheets and false banana sheets in a very simple way. And the third question, this is the last point that I wanted to make, that I asked was the building process. In that community, the building process is a communal act, a festivity where the young and the old, the female and the male participate. It's a social act, which again, the thing that we have lost in an extremely compartmentalized, professionalized modern societies. I believe that Africa has a chance to reimagine the way, not only the how we build and with what material that we build, but also the way we build in a way that respects reality, and the very act of building becomes the central activity which brings together communal life. Of course, I cannot go on these things, and I have to stop right here, and probably I'll reflect after the questions. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Zegeye, for your very inspiring presentation. There's some nice sound in the back, which is on the one hand super detailed and a very site-specific answer to a need. On the other hand, you've reached an almost philosophical dimension of construction, which is exciting. And maybe in this extreme range lies the answer to one of our guests who's asking what purpose is House of No Waste serves. So I understand the question. Is there a given use of the House of No Waste that we're looking for in this competition, or is it more a general attitude that we're looking for? And again, it is written somewhere in the competition brief that we are not defining a specific use like a kindergarten or school or a house for living. It's more the house in the overarching sense that we're looking for. And maybe, Zegeye, you can dream or reflect also on that question of what can you imagine a young person from a city, wherever on our planet, can learn from the project that you've shown to us? And I think you're muted. Oops.
Oh, yeah. Yes, obviously, I presented an example from a rural setting. And one of the challenges to think naturally, traditional societies do live by respecting natural orders and natural cycles. What we're learning from here is to, of course, in a very simplistic reading and in a simplistic way of organizing ourselves with the cycles of nature is easier in a rural setting. but cities are artifacts that we are the ones who make them. And then in these complex process of making that we have produced so many complex realities, which now are attacking us back. So one has to really learn, one has to be very brave to learn from these unendingly expansive knowledge, which is hidden in tradition as well as in nature. I think the House of West, No West, is, in my view, in my own interpretation, is an attempt to reconceptualize the way we build through, in a very deeper sense, through understanding the cycles which are aligned with nature itself. Of course, for example, when we talk about recycling, reusing, you know, all this kind of cyclicality, we are dealing with, or we are trying to learn from how nature functions in terms of its own complex metabolism. So whether it is in the urban area or in the rural area, I think what we have to be brave about is to question the dictums of our traditional way of thinking, be it architecture or engineering, and try to put these challenges that we are facing now as the things that we have to address, and then try to draw inspirations from wherever it comes. And then our criteria is, how does that thing respond to the things that we cannot challenge, which is the order of nature. I think that is what I am quite inspired from all the pictures. The last one, only this detailed image of the window and the surface, is the only one that I took from my own project, because I'm not very much sure whether I really interpreted what they have achieved for centuries in my modern way of interpretation. So I encourage young people to question and even to challenge the dictums of their disciplinary positions, and try to strive in order to achieve and in order to address very, very boldly, I would say, the challenge which are given in the brief of this competition. So it's not about yesterday, it's not also about today, it's about the future, which we architects are responsible in organizing the human habitat anyways, be it in a less dense rural setting or in a highly sophisticated urban setting. Be it technology or tradition, what we have to think about is how do we respond to the impending realities and challenges that we ourselves have created, which are also very well described in your competition brief.
Okay, thank you very much, Zegeye. And I think we should collect more contributions to show our competitors also the variety that we may expect. There is one or two more questions. I will get back to them maybe after we've listened to our next speaker, which is Barbara Buser from Switzerland. Barbara, I hope you're with us, and I will again share your presentation on my screen, and I hope this time it works from the very beginning. Barbara, the mic is yours.
Hello. Very nice to see you all, and I loved your presentation, Zegeye. I've been working 10 years in Africa, and I've tried to learn from the Africans and the way they build houses. There in Sudan, the houses only survive one season, and so they have to be rebuilt every year, also by the community. And I'm amazed to see that your houses, they last for 50 to 70 years. That's great. I think it's a complete contradiction, and you also said it, that in Switzerland, in Europe, in America, we are trying to build so that it lasts. That's your words. And we try to build so that it lasts, but we are demolishing buildings after 40 years, after 20 years. It's just crazy, because a building has no defined life age. It can be maintained, it can last for 100 years, 2, 3, 4, 500 years in Europe, the way we build. But we pull them down after 40 years. It's just crazy. And for me, this is the essence of this competition, to show young architects that either you build in a way that the building can die, as you say, die without leaving traces, or you try to reuse the materials, or the best, don't pull down any existing building. I'm going to show you a little presentation about a contract we got from Transa, which is an outdoor material equipment provider. And he's caring for the environment because he wants to encourage people to go out to the nature, and he gives them all the equipment you need. If you're an European, in Africa, nobody would walk around with all this gear, but that's what we are used to. So they gave us a commission to re-equip their headquarters. Can we see the next picture? Which is in a very stubborn building of the 80s. It's not attractive at all, but that's where they have the outlet store, and on the first floor they have their offices. Next time. So we said to them, we agreed with them that we will reorganize their offices, rebuild them for a new generation of people who work differently, but without producing any waste. No waste is supposed to leave this construction site. And we even added, so on the left side you see windows which were leftovers from another project, reused already, and we tried to use them. You will see how. And we took down all the ceiling and we cut it into pieces and we built the walls with it on the right side. Next. That's how it looks. The doors are the same, but then we had to fill the openings, and we did it, as I said, with these cut-offs of the ceiling. Next. And this is what we did with the carpet, for example, because you need some noise absorption in an office. So we put the carpet as a wall on the wall, and we used the concrete drill holes we used for a column to make a table. We added some old furniture, and the most important, the people wanted plants, and that of course helps a lot to make a room livable, to make a room nice. You see now the bolt ceiling, which has no cover anymore. We put some new lights. They're used from another site, but we put them, and you see on the windows, how did we use the windows to make a wall, an inside wall, to separate the offices from the corridor. Next. Yeah, another picture of the same situation, because it was two steps. We did the half of the office first, and they had to concentrate on one side, and then we did the other half, and now they have enough space for everybody. Next. Is that going back? Next. Yeah, this shows you the kitchen. We used the carpet which was on the floor as on the kitchen furniture, and we put an old carpet on the floor. Just this little change makes a lot of impact. We found an old kitchen which we equipped with new how do you call that, the wooden parts where you pull out the door, and we added some blackboards which are from a school. In all the Swiss schools, they are now installing electronic blackboards, and they throw away the old ones, and they are perfect for using on a wall. The lamps, you see them, they are these old types of desk lamps, so we hang them on the ceiling, and we had to define and invent a new kind of noise absorption. We used part of the noise absorption panels which were on the ceiling. Yep, next. We also used their old their advertisement panels we used to make a letterbox for the employees. So you see the pictures of nature on the side. Next. And that's another blackboard. We had to close the door, but we left it. It's almost a piece of art to see this old blackboard on a former opening, and you see again how we dealt with the light and the absorption plates on the ceiling. And we added, the only new thing we added is the floor line on the down to make the picture nicer. And because if you clean the floor and you don't have any protection, you will have a line of dirt after 2 years, and you have to repaint the whole wall. So we are preventing this by putting this green line underneath. Next. And this is the little games we allowed ourselves. We have a niche where also made from old blackboards and from the old ceiling plates. And this is where you can sit with your telephone and have your private chats. Next. Yeah, that's another, because we don't have twice the same material, so we use the same form, but we use other materials for the same purpose. So this is what I wanted to show you. We did not transport any material out. We all used it up in a different way, and we even had to supply more used materials like the windows or these blackboards to make the wall. Yeah, so that's one example of our work. We are since 30 years, we are about 60 architects in our practice. And since 30 years, we are trying to reuse as much as we can, but it always depends on the owner of the work. If he wants it and if he agrees, then you can do a lot of things. If they say, no, we really want the normal and we don't want to make experiments, then it's not our client. Thank you for listening. We don't hear you.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara, for your impressive presentation. And maybe I allow a question from myself. I mean, you've been a pioneer for so many years now in this attitude of recycling material, and the project that you show us is truly a radical and almost complete answer.
I'm sorry, it's not recycling, please. It's reuse.
Reuse.
Because recycling means destroying the form and melt it down again and using a lot of energy. And reuse is keeping the form, reusing it in a different way. Sorry for that.
Oh, that's very important to put again more light on the question that we're asking here. That it's not such a simple issue that we're talking about. I mean, if you don't think a lot about this question, it may be a simple answer like I just did. You just recycle things, what we all know from our garbage bins. But still, I mean, you're looking at the market now for so many years, and that people pick up your thoughts maybe. However, it's a big challenge and an almost impossible way of doing for many. However, and you are in Switzerland, of course, where everybody would say, well, yes, the Swiss, I mean, they're so precise and perfect. I mean, it needs a lot of organization and logistics in regular construction, but also in approaches where there's the reuse of material issue. How can you, which main challenges do you see in your daily work in Switzerland, but also what you can recognize in colleagues who are trying to follow your ideas in other places?
I think the biggest challenge is to switch in the mind, that not everything is available every time, anytime, at any place in the world. But you have to start from what you have. And then you start doing your design, your innovation with what you have, be it clay, be it wood, be it stones, whatever you find on place, this is what you have to use and start with. I think that's the most important thing, is this change of mind. And I found quite some engineers, not the architects, but the engineers are quite responsive to these ideas. And they say, no problem, we can optimize towards using less material. We can optimize towards using steel or wood or whatever you need, you want. But the engineers' problem is that they just try to make the architects' wishes come true. And they should speak up much more, saying, okay, look here, you have all these trees. Why don't you use the trees to build? Look here, we have a hall built with steel. Why don't you reuse the steel? Why do you always want to use concrete? And the engineers should tell the architects, look, we can do everything you want, but we can optimize towards less material or faster or cheaper. And this is also the choice of the owner of the building, of course. So the owner, the architect, the engineer, they have to work together, and then you can change things. My only hope is on the young generation, and this is why I'm participating in this competition, because I hope that the young people, they realize and they get serious in using less resources and making less waste, because we can't afford anymore. Our world is going to blow up, it's going to heat up, and if we don't stop construction and we don't stop change our mind. Thank you.
Well, I assume that also there's some regulatory challenges in some places where norms and laws, building laws and codes are creating barriers. And you mentioned now the client, the architect, and the engineer. I think it should also be the administration to be embraced. And at the end, that brings us back to the thought of Zegeye, that more of a togetherness in construction is needed, and not thinking only in your own disciplines. Is there any more questions that came in? Well, yes, there's one question about what form of submission is expected. I will come back to that at the very end. I'm afraid you need some patience. I will talk anyway about the form of submission and the question of if the scope of the house of waste is no waste is building only, and is the scope of waste also construction and demolition. I think that's exactly what Barbara was just talking about. It's not only about a building, a piece of building. It's an attitude. It's a strategy. All of it has to come together. And whether you're presenting at the end more focus on the strategy or the outcome of it, or a detail of the outcome, there's no regulations in the competition on that. I would then move on to our third presenter, which is Mark Lee. We are changing the continent now and looking to America. Mark, are you with us?
Hi. Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you. Indeed, it's. I was hoping to join this webinar in Europe, but unfortunately there was a change of plans. So it's almost 2 a.m. in Los Angeles right now. So if my mind is a bit foggy, please forgive me. Okay. It was an inspiration to hear Barbara and Zegeye. So I chose a topic that I like to share about adaptive reuse, maybe from a more American perspective. And before showing the project, as we all know, it's within the American context. It is something that emerged in the 1970s in response to the conservation movement and growing environmental awareness, focusing on reusing that rather than replacing or repurposing existing buildings to serve different uses. And oftentimes in school, as a teacher myself, when we've thought about or discuss about adaptive reuse, there are different models, and oftentimes a lot of these models not only discuss about the restoration or preservation of these buildings, but also focus a lot on the new interventions of different language onto these buildings. You know, examples like Carlo Scarpa's Castelvecchio in Verona, or the Musée d'Orsay in Paris, or addition to existing buildings, like or new buildings that are integrated with existing buildings, like the recent Fondazione Prada in Milan by OMA, or the SESC Pompeia of Lina Bobadi's in Sao Paulo. Now, there's another direction that's been gaining more traction in academia. I think one is the notion of a type of critical reconstruction, like Neues Museum in Berlin, or the so-called leftist as it is approach, like the Palais de Tokyo of Lacaram Vassal, or the Venice Fondazione Prada. So today I'd like to show a project in the US by a large office, HÖW done in 2006, and it is the Park Avenue Armory in New York. And it's an interesting project of preservation, but for me, it's also about dealing with two typologies that are quite sustainable. So while we're resharing, I think I can share a bit about the history of this building. It was built in 1881, and it was located in New York, and it was the home of the 7th Regiment of the New York Militia. It was a volunteer part-time military unit of citizen soldiers, and it was built by one of the members, you know, of this regiment, who was an architect, Charles Clinton. Yes, so yeah, this was like built in 1881. It's a very eclectic mix of romanticism, medieval, and military elements, you know. And over the last 100 or so years, it has been restored and remodeled over different times. Can we see the next one, please? We see the front and then the side elevation. What is interesting is really the combination of two types. One is really a palazzo type of building that faces the street, and then the other is a large industrial hall that is in the back. Next, please. Here you see the plan. Next, please. The front is this so-called head house, the palazzo type, and then the second one is this drill hall, the big shed in the back. Next, please. So this is a cross-section of this head house. One can see all the different rooms that were in this kind of palazzo type. Next, please. And then a very open, multi-purpose hall, stadium type of building, a shed in the back. Next, please. You know, so over time, it has been a major social center, although started off as serving this militia group, but it has been a very public building that hosted the dances and shows and played a very important role on Park Avenue. Next, please. Now, over time, you can see all the different things that have been taken away or added, like a 5th floor, or taking away the tower. And this is only in the larger scale of the massing, but a lot of changes has happened in the interior. Next, please. Some of these historical images of how the hall is occupied. Next, please. All these social events, you know, for the military group. Next, please. So when HÖW were commissioned, you know, the building really has fallen into decay, you know, and the city has managed to turn it into a public building. And a lot of the historical rooms were quite raw and showed the historical weight of the structure. And also, like in the big hall, you see on the right-hand side, when HÖW visited, they still have all the wires that were set up by the emergency units during the 9/11 disaster. Next, please. So I think HÖW decided that they're going to, one thing that was radical for them is, rather than a very typical adaptive reuse for this type of building, which is not very much a monument, it's really treat it as a monument and preserving it for the future. Next, please. So this is a quote of Jacques Herzog, who said, this is a conservative approach, but to do that is actually quite radical, because by doing this, we can really preserve the status and then adapt it rather than adapting it for a special use. So I'm going to go through the project very quickly. So Next, please. So the first part is these two different types, the head house and then the drill hall. Next, please. So I want to show a couple of rooms in this head house. So this is one of the first rooms, the way they analyzed the building with this developed set, drawing with all the interior elevations. Next, please. They also begin to juxtapose photographs from the 1880, the original state of the building, to what the building was right now, and step by step begin to notice things that have been plastered over. For example, in this case, the fireplace was covered, the mirror was reduced. Next, please. And then it involved a lot of forensic work to overcome and strip off and find step by step, return it to its 1880 state. For example, next, please. Discovering the woodwork was actually mostly intact, and how you can basically clean the mahogany and make this reddish copper with this reddish copper paint. Next, please. Also, they needed to modifications were necessary, and then so they tried to incorporate both the historical aspect of the building, but also bring in these type of new infrastructure. So, for example, this vintage cabinet here actually hides a ventilation system. Next, please. Yeah, instead of the locker. So you have this big ventilation system that was in this vintage locker. Next, please. Also, the concept of lighting was to reinterpret the original chandelier. You know, on the original one, there was this 19th century chandelier. Then when they found it, it was really a colonial light. But rather than replicating it, is to introduce a newer language that somehow echoes or rhymes with the original one. So I think this type of light touch, but not completely total full restoration or preservation, has been the general attitude towards the restoration of this building. And next, please. This is the finished version of that room. I'd like to show you one more room in this building. Next, please. This is another similar type of room. Next, please. You know, there were not only the ceiling has been destroyed, some of the artifacts like the chandelier has been destroyed, but a lot of additions has been added on over the years. And the architects have a lot of discussion about like where should we preserve some of the aspect, because there are also layers of history over time. But then they decided at one point to go back to the 1888 interior. Next, please. I think one of the issues were these are some of the mock-ups of the new LED lighting that were needed for the public use, and how they can echo some of the motifs of the original building. Next, please. And at the end, they decided to contrast it with a very different light. This is the finished room, leaving the ceiling exposed rather than replicating it, but introducing a very industrial light that works for the type of performances and events they would need for a public building. Next, please. The circulation is really about turning it into a public street that is equipped for the technical infrastructure for cultural events. Next, please. So very small details like adding a copper handrail, you know, to make it up to code to the existing grand stair. Next, please. Here you see it's being used for a public dinner. Next, please. The before and after, how the ceiling was redone. Next, please. And then this little copper handrail that makes it to code. Most of the so-called new interventions of this building that was not there before was actually done in copper. Next, please. And perhaps one of the most radical thing about it is turning one room into an elevator. So the entire room becomes not only a service elevator, but also be used to service both the head house and then the drill hall. So this historical door would open, and the entire room is an elevator, copper finish, so-called the moving copper room. Next, please. Here you see the interior of the elevator. Next, please. And then finally, the drill hall. The drill hall, a lot of it is really restoring it to the industrial character, the structural clarity of the building. A lot of it is about incorporating new type of lighting, new type of ventilation and event infrastructure. Next, please. So it's really an issue of erasing a lot of the things that has been added on over the time around the perimeter. Next, please. Or integrating infrastructure and lighting between the joists and the trusses. Next, please. Here are some of the full-scale mock-ups of new lighting in the existing structure. Next, please. This is the finished product. And then these are some of the events that it has hosted. So this is the last image. And one of the reasons I chose this building, besides how the architects have a very sensitive touch in restoring that building, but also for me, it represents two very adaptable types. You know, as an architect, I work a lot with art institutions or public institutions. And oftentimes we find historically that the types that are most adaptable are either the palazzo or the industrial shed. You know, I think examples of these two types coming together as one, for example, could be seen in a lot of 19th century train stations where you have the so-called palazzo being the waiting hall that faces the city, and then the industrial shed being the train hall in the back. You know, so this type is, for me, this is very much this train station type, that both of these types with different degrees of flexibility become into one building that has been restored. So although I'm focusing on a adaptive reuse project, I also think the idea of a flexible type that could accommodate many different uses also contributes to the longevity of a new building. So that's all. Thank you.
Well, that was a lot, Mark. Thank you very much. My team was wondering how to present so many slides in such short time, but you managed very well. And I should remind our guests that you can post your questions using the Q&A button in the Teams program, and the team here will recognize your questions. And we will try to answer them now in the time that is left here for our webinar. One of the mystery things about competitions is that as a competitor, you have no idea, no clue what a jury is doing and how they're discussing. So I wonder, since we have 3 members of our jury here together, and imagine yourself that the projects that were just presented, not as finished project, but as a strategy, would be submitted in our competition. Maybe we can do that play a little bit, or the real discussion, whether or to what extent are these examples contributing as an innovative approach to the criteria that we've given in the House of No Waste. I don't know if that's a way of thinking. And of course, the projects that were shown there, they are almost perfect, and they're ideal. But maybe it's interesting for our guests anyhow to learn also not only from the speaker but also from the others why this is an approach for that very specific situation, but giving an answer that has an impact for many other places. So, for instance, Zegeye, if you listen to the project that was just presented by Mark, what comes into your mind? How does this attitude, and at the end it's probably an attitude that is behind the project, could be a lesson learned for the next generation in the sense of building maybe not with no waste but with much less waste.
Yes, obviously, in almost all urban structures that we see buildings as they are, I mean, the whole building as wastes waiting for their decay. And to look at them and to reimagine them, or to look at them as not only pieces of resources, but as a package of resource which can be reinvented, for me is something that we have to look into, because particularly probably not in Africa, as the number of cities and the bulk of urban production is not that big, but probably in any other continents that we see, we have produced a lot of structures, and then the artist's eye, the architect's eye, have to be sharp enough to penetrate them in order to see qualities to rediscover and then to be reinvented for public use. And in that case, that I see buildings not only as a machine to produce new resources in a way that mining from them, but building as they are to be rediscovered as a treasure. I mean, for that purpose, what Lee has been presenting was, for me, quite an example, though it's quite big for young architects to comprehend. It's a massive structure, and I can imagine how many details that one has to produce, and one has to read all these things through histories, through details of construction. But at least to look at and then reimagine is such an exercise of innovation.
Yeah, I fully agree. And maybe vice versa, Mark. And don't worry, we give you soon time to go to bed. This very private situation of the project that was shown by Zegeye. You meet your clients in Texas. What do you think they could? How could they understand that the strategy being implemented here is something that can be transformed to questions in Texas or wherever, in Montana or beautiful places in North Carolina?
Mm-hmm. That's really a great question. This is something I really do not know, because this is something, this difference is something I experienced having lived in Europe and then coming back to the US. And oftentimes it's not an architectural question, or construction question. It has to do with the resources, and also the mentality of living. When I lived in Switzerland or Germany, I remember I was so surprised that I would find a young patron who wants to build a house to live there forever, and pass on to their children, And whereas in the U.S. it's always about how can I sell the house in 5 years and make a profit and move on, with this upward mobility. So the investment for the person who wants to build a house forever and pass on to their kids, wants to build a house that will last forever, but they put in the cost is less of an issue. Whereas the one who wants to sell the house in 5 years wants to spend the least amount of money. So this is the structure and the culture was quite different. And this is this. I feel like I'm looking at other practices. Like I remember Frank Gehry once said when he was young, he said, I was looking at art and looking at Rauschenberg and Jasper Johns. They build these things out of dirt, and then it's costs very little. But then the institution spends so much time to preserve it, and then he said he realized when it's not just when it becomes art, when it gets into another cultural level, then there's another level of money that will come in, whether to preserve it or to instigate something. So I could imagine more happening in public institutions, as opposed to private construction. So that's my reaction to this mentality, which I really admire. But it's the implementation of that it's much harder, I think, in the U.S. context.
Well, that saves a little bit for our discipline that beauty, obviously, or architectural quality in that sense, plays a role to convince people to take care. But you also bring in now the economic dimension. Barbara, that's maybe a question for you. I mean, of course, also the economy is a criteria in construction, and motivation to reuse should not go along with more costs. And I can imagine that there's one or the other who hesitates when he's or she's listening to your ideas. That either, yeah, that's going to cost more, and we wouldn't find the material, and then isn't this beautiful at the end? So it's probably also a mindset in terms of what is beautiful. In that sense, maybe you can share some of your experience. How can you convince clients and make your strategy being more successful at the end? And you need to put on your mic.
It's all a question of the proportion of the cost of labor and the cost of materials. In Africa, materials are 90% of the price. I'm exaggerating a bit, and labor is 10%, and in Switzerland, it's the contrary. So it's not even payable, it's not even feasibly, economically feasible to take down a window carefully in order to reuse it. It costs more than to destroy it. And this is completely wrong. There should be a heavy fee on destruction of any material, be it windows, be it wood, be it steel, whatever. And only that's why we are not even 1% of the architects or the constructors dealing with reuse. It's really a little niche. I think there's no other way out of our crisis, but as long as the conditions do not change, it's very difficult. I was reacting heavily against your saying we are doing recycling, because the recycling industry has been financed by the industry by very expensive fees. If you make a PET bottle, you have to pay already in advance that it has to be recycled. For the reuse, these fees do not exist, and it's ridiculous. We are all trying to keep somehow economic and to convince our people, the owners of the works, that environmentally they would have to react differently. And we are trying to get certificates for CO2, which is not emitted and things like that. But it can, in the present landscape, economical landscape of Switzerland, forget it. It's really some exceptions, and we are working in a very little niche. But in other countries, I think it's more possible because the labor is not so expensive.
Okay, so learning from Switzerland, but exercising in other places. That's why not?
Yeah, we are global. We are working globally and thinking globally, I hope.
So maybe to elaborate a little bit more on our expectation into this competition, Zegeye. If a young person would approach you now tomorrow, yeah, I heard about this competition, etc., but and you're on the jury. I mean, what do you really expect from this competition? What kind of project should I submit? I mean, what would you answer that young person? It's tough.
I mean, there are levels of subjects that one has to engage boldly. The primary probably would be, architecture is a production. By the end of the day, you have an object. and then that object is produced primarily from materials. And I wanted to draw their attention to what that material is and understand what it is, and then how that material is somehow kind of injected into this production of the final object, the final product architecture. And then obviously, as it is clearly written on the brief, closing the material loop has to be one of probably the prime issue that they can look at. That's exactly why I also brought this very traditional simple tukul, where you have the material, your object, and the material dies, and it becomes soil and becomes an ingredient for the next bamboo shoot. And then it goes on. It's a very simple thing. So one is that one at the list that one has to see on what. And the second one probably is how it is it assembled. It's also written on the brief. Is it easy, like Barbara was saying, is it easy if one wants to reuse a part of it after it being produced? So the how is also another thing that one has to look into. And the third one, probably in my view at least, is how it is it invites people to engage. I really like the idea of building as an act, which allows people to participate. Our modern construction industry actually is extremely expert-based, and it alienates itself from the very classical, historic, timeless way of building, which is building as an act, as a social act, which brings people together. And knowledge of production is not concentrated to the few, but it is an instinctive, in a way, just like the birds or the ants, an instinctive act that everybody can indeed collaborate, so that one has to know how to build, and then one has to also contribute in this social transaction. So these are the three things that I would somehow, imply. I don't know if I'm allowed or not to talk to competitors if they come privately or individually to me, but this is generally what I think, and generally I want them to look at how nature works. I think it was Henry Lefebvre who said that, we shall do the way nature does. So probably that's the best place to learn from in order to project our coexistence in this funny planet to the future, or in the future, yeah.
Well, since you're allowed to talk to the competitors here, I would have no worry if you give the same advice to other colleagues that you meet on the street. Oh, yeah. And, no, thank you so much for this answer on behalf of these young colleagues to you guys. I would now move on. Since this is a very practical thing where the jury is in the lucky position that they don't have to come up with answers. They rely on what is contributed, and I will now again share my screen and talk a very little bit about this procedure. The first one is, of course, hopefully convinced by the discussion we have today. I'm inviting everybody to join in 2 weeks, the second webinar, where we have 3 other speakers. And both webinars are recorded, so they're available then to revisit and to learn. And also we are right now in the process of collecting participants, and we hope that the information about this procedure is spreading all over the place. And those who hear about it only in a few weeks, maybe they can still revisit these webinars. Then there is a limit, as always in a competition. The deadline is December 1st. We have an online submission, so there's no need to go to the mail office and to look for the right stamp. So this is the very simple information about the deadlines. What do we expecting? There is a document here on the right-hand side, our step-by-step guide, which is giving some advice on how you submit your project. It's a number of information, of course, needed about the authors. As it was asked already, yes, you can add more than one team member. You can just put add more, and if at the end you have a classroom of 30 people together, that's fine. In that step, you also have to confirm that you are meeting the requirements on the age limit. So that's the first step, a little bit formal. By the way, you can always revisit your own submission, so you can it's saved, and you can spend a day doing other things, and then you just move on. So the second step is the project details, and that is the first of two super important parts, of course. Not only because it's maybe an unusual competition. I mean, if we would make a competition for the design of a school building, everybody would pretty much know what we're expecting, and the jury knows what to look at. Here, I foresee an enormous variety of different answers, and probably there's a lot of hidden qualities which should not be hidden. And that's one of your main thought you should have preparing the project details and the images. Show your idea, present it, make it understandable, because the jurors cannot guess the quality. They need to know, and they need to understand the strategy, and in particular when the strategy is not in images like a drawing or something, you need to write it down, and that's the project details. So where does the idea come from? What are you aiming for? We give you the space to write some text. So we're expecting text, and the text should be understandable and somehow bold enough that a jury can digest the information within short time. And then you can upload up to 3 images, and I will come back in a second to these images. And at the very end, of course, there's a validation, and then you submit the contribution. So don't miss the final submission button, otherwise we wouldn't receive it. Then we have our 6 jury members who will review the projects, and at the end come hopefully to the conclusion of selecting the right award winners. The hints, of course, submissions should align somehow with the competition brief and the HØW criteria. So I really recommend to take a look at this document, which was written with care, and the HØW criteria. They're super broad, but also very detailed. And experience shows in this kind of competition that nobody will be able to meet every single criteria in 100%. But you should focus on more than one criteria. So very selective solutions, which may even produce a contradiction to other criteria, are likely not very successful. But to look to more than one of the criteria and focus on them and be clear, that's an advice I would give with my experience. And the same is as I was just challenging the jury members to put themselves into the position of a competitor. Now it's the other way around. When you prepare your presentation, put yourself in the position of the jury member. Can you read the drawings? Are they interesting? Are they attractive, maybe even? But most important, can you understand the information that you want to deliver? So open your heart, and then again, click to submit. And even if you've submitted, you can re-enter until the deadline. In terms of images, I mentioned that you can upload up to 11 images. I would just give the advice, don't send us 11 renderings from the same building, one with sunshine and the other one in moonlight and the other way around. it's nice to have some renderings, and if the whole idea is only about the best rendering in the world, okay. But experience shows, as I said, to meet more than one of the criteria, you need to have also diverse presentation. You can, of course, make a layout of these image files that include more than one component, so different diagrams together with text or plans, sections, whatever is needed to present your idea. Again, the character of the ideas will be very different. If you focus on material science, we don't need a site plan. But if you have a strategy for a specific site, you should also show us what is the surrounding, where are you, what kind of climate is your project in? Because an answer that is maybe true for a rural place in Africa is completely wrong when you have it in the Antarctic. So we need site-specific information if it's a project about a certain site. So, and of course, they need to have a certain resolution that we can ideally also zoom into the drawings. The jury will have a tool where they can zoom into the in the files that also details can be identified. So this is few information about the images, and again the text. Be concise and with a bold and direct writing, and no blah blah blah. I would also summarize it. And maybe you can also have headlines and be, yeah, as it's written here, front load your key ideas and stay engaging in an interesting language. Unfortunately, we all have to somehow join in English or whatever English interpretation of that language. We have to apologize to all native speakers, but this is what we agree on, that somehow we can understand the ideas. And finally, emphasize what sets your project apart. Why do you believe this is the winner? I mean, in every competition, when I was a young student and I helped some architects doing their competition entry, one of the first things I learned was, I mean, of course, we're taking part in the competition because we want to win. So we have to believe in our project and make this and give this inspiration into the project. Only then you can be successful. This is what I can share in terms of the procedure, and I think we're quite good in time, and I hope what I just said answered already the questions that we had here in the chat about the procedure. Yeah, I think that should answer it. Maybe a last round to our jurors. Is there anything you can add? I mean, you all have been on juries. From your experience, what makes the difference of a winning project to the others? Not only in terms, of course, the idea, and a good jury discovers the idea if they have the right time. But maybe you have some other experience. Mark, I would start with you. You have to unmute.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, there's not much to add after what Zegeye said. I think his 3 points were very clear. And I would just say, you know, to the participants, you know, I think have very clear and very simple and very direct idea. And I also think that doesn't need to have a conflict between ethics and aesthetics. You know, there's something that's always ineffable that makes your project stand out together with the intention behind the project. So I would keep that in mind.
Thank you. And Barbara, any experience that you would like to share with the next generation in terms of competitions and how to be the winner?
I think it's the personal engagement, the personal, that you really give all your heart into a project. That's what counts for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's one other thing I learned from colleagues. Rather focus on one competition than participating in 10 at the same time. Zegeye, final words from you. Again, the microphone.
I think it's, I believe that it is quite an opportunity for the young ones to participate this, and then they shall treat it as a great opportunity. And of course, everyone wants to win, obviously, and good luck. But to participate itself is a wonderful chance that one has not to lose. When it comes to submittals, I think you have said it quite clearly. The first thing is that one has to be very clear and direct, because there will be many probably submittals, and then going through, the jury might not have that much time to really try to understand the riddles in your compositions. So it is necessary to have a direct communication and a readable presentation. That is very important, both diagrammatically and textually. These are things that I wanted to remind them.
Okay, thank you. Well, of course, the process of the jury will depend on the number of entries we have, and what I can promise to everybody who is investing time and ideas and thought, that we will take care and we will make possible that the quality of the project is that we find it. But again, you have to bring it not on paper in the sense, but into the presentation. Yeah. All right, then I would like to finish this webinar and give back the microphone for maybe some final words by Edel Günther, coming from Dresden, I assume.
Yes, thank you so much, Benno. Yeah, so who will be the winner? My vision is that the winner will be our planet, will be our societies in the end, for the cause of no waste of material, no waste of energy, of water, of biota, but also of costs, of space, of all the different resources. And when we say house, it's not only meant to be one building, but it can be more. It can also describe institutions. It can even describe a new style. That would be my vision, that the House of No Waste will become a leading style or genre for buildings of the future. Thank you, and back to Benno.
Fantastic. Well, then I thank all of you, and now I have an echo. Now it's gone. Thank you so much for, of course, you, Edel, and our three speakers. One of them even joining in the middle of the night. Thank you for all of those who have shown your interest, and we hope that helps you to not only prepare your contribution in this competition, but maybe it gives you also a little bit of some inspiration for your careers. In that sense, we are finishing for today, and we may meet again in 2 weeks, same channel, and I wish you a good day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Same to you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.